All right, and we're back for another episode of the Lakers Fast Break podcast. It's Gerald Glassford coming right back at you here from Lakers Fast Break. Pop Culture Cosmos, Inside Sports Fantasy Football, and Game Source. We truly appreciate everyone out there listening to all of our shows. And if you can, please give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Plus, if you could like, share, subscribe, follow, or do anything that you can to support us right here at the Lakers Fast Break. And I'm chuckling for a second here. I'll tell you why in a second. It is truly appreciated. And before we get into today's meeting of the minds, so to speak, on the second half of the season, I want to go ahead and first say, you know what, a big thank you to, I guess it's Manini. I can't really get that, I can't really get that name right, but I want to say, you know what, I do appreciate, first off, you giving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. That it goes without saying, so we do appreciate it. But your review has been the source of conversation here ever since, because I want to go ahead and tell this on the air because it is a 5-star review.
Oh, man.
It starts off with the title, Fire the Old Man. He's rude, cuts everyone off. He has Skip Bayless-esque. Well, that's actually a lot of money if you said that's the way. But
right, that's not a bad.
That's not a bad thing. That's millions of dollars right there for you. But ESPN tried to get him back, but couldn't do it. Didn't have the money. Skip Bayless-esque talking points. He's dragging all of us down. Cut him loose. His boomer opinions are not congruent with the rest of the cast, which is true, and I will give you that. and he's rude about establishing his opinions. Well, yes, he is rude. He is a little overbearing, but the fact is he is 78 and he can't hear any but one of us when we talk half the time. So that's okay. We're patient with them. We're patient with them.
I don't think he's rude.
I do.
No,
he does. But sometimes it's just because he can't hear you. Because when he starts talking, when the motor gets running, he can't stop. So it's okay.
LakerTom just has a lot of passion and ideas. That's fine. I appreciate that.
It says, no room for him, trim the fat, fire the old man. All right, fire old man Tom. Well, it's actually fire old man LakerTom, but I will say this.
Oh, man.
Tom has been an incredible part of this show, and his platform, Lakerholics.com, I have a great fondness for, and cannot thank enough for allowing us to share that space with his community. Second of all, I kind of like the fact that there is an opposing view a lot of times with us. And I know we've gotten into arguments before on the air, and it's become harsh at times. I have said since the beginning of the year that I wanted to become a little bit more patient with Tom because, he has his views, and sometimes it does create a lot of interest. In fact, there's a lot of people out there on the reviews that sometimes don't like what we have to say, what Jamie, myself, and Sean has to say. It's just me and Jamie.
I've
read you letters before. Sean hasn't got it. He's good so far. Yeah, maybe on historians might actually get him, but because since he's our historian here. But I will say this: I do appreciate again the 5-star review and your comments. I do also want to go ahead and say that he is staying on for as long as he's like. I just am going to be a little bit gentler with him in the future. Because, I don't want to be the one there were times when I was seriously scared I was going to put him 6 feet under, that I would be the cause of it. Ooh. And that we would all have to go to LakerTom's funeral, and that MagicMan and Jamie would be standing beside me, both giving me the evil eye. And I'll say, what? I'm sorry. Jared Dudley is not the best 15th man in the league. So, you know what, I'm being a little bit gentler, being a little more patient. But, yeah, LakerTom is who he is, and that's why we love him here. He does have a differentiating opinion, and that's fine because I don't always want a show where it's, okay, I agree, you agree, I agree, you agree. It's nice to have an opposing opinion, and LakerTom does love the Lakers. He's passionate about the Lakers. He sees the Lakers in a different color shade of glasses than probably any one of us. He sees it in a way a lot of Laker fans out there on social media see it, as far as the Lakers really can't do anything wrong. We like to look at it a little bit differently sometimes, and that's why we get into arguments. But again, LakerTom is a valued member, and I do appreciate the 5-star review. And if you don't continue to listen because of LakerTom, I'm going to have to say I'm sorry. LakerTom is just too great of a part of this program, and I'm welcome to have him aboard. But I do thank you again for listening and that 5-star review. Sean, I know you had a comment before we go into the show.
Yes, I did, Gerald. I was going to say, as far as contrarians go, yeah, Tom just gives his opinion. And I think the big
it's got his picture in the dictionary under the word contrarian. I just wanted to let you know.
Yeah, but I mean, I would say that would be the big difference between Tom and Skip Bayless. Skip Bayless is a character that is under contract with Fox Sports. LakerTom is a real person. That is the huge difference.
That is a huge difference. And yeah, right. And we talked, Skip Bayless has said in the review, Skip Bayless he's actually paid and compensated to think the way he thinks, and whether or not he actually in real life thinks that actually the same way, or all those crazy things that he says, or he just knows it to go ahead and push buttons. Stephen A. Smith is paid and compensated millions of dollars, I'm assuming, from Disney and ESPN, simply the fact that he is going ahead and saying, those hot takes and whatnot. And yes, LakerTom has his hot takes, just like Skip does, just like we do from time to time. So, again, we don't always agree on everything here at the Lakers Fast Break, but again, and I know LakerTom, just because of, again, he is who he is, does take over the conversation times. But again, that's why he is who he is. He's such a great personality, and we are happy to have him aboard. And again, glad to have him part of the broadcast. So, as long as LakerTom wants to say, and we haven't kicked him out, he's going to stay here for as long as he wants. So, you like that, LakerTom? Is that okay?
Gerald, you can't put yourself out there unless you're willing to take the hits that come with it.
Oh, I always do.
I'm glad at least that I got a response from somebody in that particular case. And I will admit there are times when I come off rude. It's the nature of my personality. We may get into that later in one of the discussions that you have lined up for today, and we'll talk about.
It's not Jared Dudley.
It's not Gerald Dudley, but we'll approach that when it comes at a time. But I would say that what you may not have seen on the show is every time that I have really gotten into it with Gerald, I've apologized afterwards. Same thing with Jamie or Sean. People who may have followed the early days of Lakerholics.com might know that Sean and I used to be at our throats at each other. He's quit the blog probably a half a dozen times, and I've kicked him off a half a dozen times. But, I don't hold grudges. He doesn't hold grudges. We've become great friends in the last few years as he's matured. And as I've
I like that shot there.
Mellowed. The one thing I would object to is this constant attack on us old people, and I am not 78 years old. I hope to make it to 78. I hope to make it to 78 someday, but I'm definitely not there yet.
Well, you're 77 or 78?
Thanks for the support. I appreciate it, and I will try not to interrupt everybody.
Are you 7? Wait, let's clear this up. Are you 77 or 78?
Neither.
76.
Oh, gee, I was so far off. So excuse me for
2 years. That's a long time.
When you're 76, man, every year counts. It's a lot more than you think.
I'm a quarter century behind you. That's still not too far away. So,
my dad lived to be 101, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and believe me, I want to make sure I keep you on that course. That's all I'm going to say. But I tell you what, it's going to be a great episode we've got for you today. We're talking about a lot of things going in as we head into the second half. The NBA games have already started. The Lakers are heading into a game on Friday against Indiana, so we're looking forward to that. But we wanted to go ahead and touch on a couple topics today. First up is the Lakers themselves. Before we get into the whole buyout market, the whole trade market, I want to go ahead and talk about the Lakers themselves and where they stand heading into it. They're 24-13, third in the Western Conference, as I mentioned previously on our great podcast that we had on Saturday, which you can hear now on the Lakers Fast Break channel. They're 24-13, heading into the second half of the season. The schedule doesn't look that favorable for them, but again, this is LakerTom style because you're going to get a lot of challenges coming up in the way, and as you ramp up your own play, they're going to get some challenges as it gets closer to the end of the season. But Jamie, I'm going to start off with you, my friend. What are you looking for as far as what the Lakers need to do, and what position do you ultimately think they're going to be in when they finish the regular season? Not talking playoffs, because I don't have that discussion right now. It's too early for playoffs discussion.
I agree. I would say they're going to be probably right about where they are. I think it's going to be difficult based on the strength of schedule, based on the number of back-to-backs we have, based on the fact that I expect us to – I mean, if AD and LeBron are healthy and play all the games, I could see us climbing up to second. It's going to be hard to catch Utah unless Utah has an about face. It's some teams can – fall a little flat coming out of the All-Star break. They had a lot of mojo going. It's difficult to sustain that with the break. So I still think the Lakers are going to end up – I feel like they're going to be third. I would like for them to get as high as second. I don't want them to, break the bank trying to get higher. That's the thing. Ultimately, the seeding matters, I think, only in so much as to chart our path, hopefully, to the NBA Finals. So, home court, it isn't what it used to be, but it could be happening, man. It could be happening. There could be fans in the stands even before the end of the season, I feel like. So maybe not in California, but I mean, there's already other places, but it could happen, I feel like.
Sean, a.k.a. MagicMan, Mr. Sean Grice, I want to go ahead and hear your thoughts on how the team will perform in the second half of the season. Again, the schedule is not very easy. I do want to throw out to you, I know you've already probably researched this, but to tell everybody out there, when it comes to comparative strength of schedule, the Lakers have one of the toughest strength of schedules left on the slate as far as any NBA team, whereas Utah, because I'm really marking them, I'm putting Phoenix and the Clippers and the Lakers in a lump right now, but the team at the top, Utah, has the easiest strength of schedule in the NBA. So I think right now, for me, I think the betting odds are on Utah remaining in the first position. I want to hear your thoughts, though, on how you think the Lakers will end up. Do you think they'll actually have a chance to pass and get into first place in the Western Conference?
Gerald, in a condensed schedule like this, there's a possibility of Utah dipping a little bit, maybe losing 5 of 6 here, maybe 7 of 10. And you see the Lakers kind of sneaking up there. It reminds me similar to the 2007-8 season when Charlotte and the Lakers were battling for the top 2 spots. The Lakers ultimately got the first spot. Charlotte got the second spot. They played the Spurs, ended up losing. That was a big upset. So I think something like that is bound to happen in this West. From a historical perspective, here's what the facts tell us. So since 1947-48, they've handed out the trophy. In the 73 years, 71 of the champions have either been a first, second, or third seed. There has only been 2 teams who have not been a top 3 seed that won the NBA championship. The first one was the Boston Celtics in 1968-69. They defeated the Los Angeles Lakers, unfortunately for us. And the second was the Houston Rockets, who were a 6th seed, who ended up upsetting the favored Spurs and went on to defeat the, if I'm not mistaken,
I think it's the Knicks.
It was
the Knicks.
Or was it Orlando or Knicks?
Okay. Yeah, no, it was a 7-gamer against the Knicks.
Are you sure it wasn't the Shaq year? Okay.
No, it was. Sorry, no, it was the Shaq year. It was
Shaq. Okay, just want to make sure. I didn't know because I know there was that 2-year period where Houston won back to back, and one was against the Knicks and one was against Shaq-led Orlando teams. Just want to make sure.
I mean, Nick Anderson just tore the heart out of Orlando. My God.
Yeah.
That and Dwight Howard couldn't make free throws, so they've had some tough luck in Orlando. But that's a good opinion right there for you from Sean. And, of course, Jamie, I want to thank you both. I also want to give a big shout-out to Delbert Lynn Ammons for giving us a thumbs up on Facebook. But LakerTom, I want to hear your thoughts on the second half. How do you think the team will progress? I know everybody's already saying, well, LakerTom's just going to say it's a done deal. They're going to be first place in the Western Conference, la-di-da. But I just want to make sure that everybody knows he does his research. He looks out there and sees the landscape of what's going on. So LakerTom, I know you're writing it already for LakerHolics.com, but what are your prospects for the team as far as the second half and where they'll end up?
I think a lot of it depends on what they do at the trade deadline, to be honest. I think even though you don't want to talk about the playoffs, I think right now that the Lakers still, if Anthony Davis and LeBron James are still the team to beat for the championship. However, I think it's a pretty high bar to to overtake the Utah Jazz at this point in time with 32 games left, and they have a 4-game lead. So I'd say that's like a 10% shot. So I expect us to finish second or third. I don't think we'll fall to fourth. I don't think the Suns will be able to maintain their current pace. I think it'll be between the Lakers and the Clippers to be second and third. And I expect the Lakers to end up being second, if LeBron and AD are healthy. I think if AD hadn't gotten his injury, the Lakers probably would be clearly second now and possibly even very close to being first in the league. We'll have to see, it's the same thing, just as confident as I am that the Lakers with LeBron and AD at their peak are the best team in the league. We always have to remember that there's a huge element of luck that falls into it between injuries and players getting hot and the ball bouncing and so forth. You have to be lucky in addition to being good. And that's the main reason why I think the Lakers have to make a move at this point in time at the trade deadline to improve their three-point shooting, their rim protection, simply because otherwise they leave themselves open to being unlucky. And that's the only way that they're going to lose the championship this year.
This is Raphael from NBA Draft Junkies.com, and you are listening to the Lakers Fast Break.
Check out what's been going on with the Pop Culture Cosmos Show and the PCC Multiverse.
That is by far my favorite because it's also character driven and the stakes are high and there's much more of a mystery and intrigue to it.
A game like Wolfenstein, which people are saying are one of the most socially important video games of the past 10 years.
Catch our shows on radio worldwide 7 days a week or at any time on Podbean, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or on over 30 more podcast outlets. Well, I think that the realistic shot of being in second place is there. I think it's there for the Lakers to take. I mean, they're right there in the mix with the Clippers and Phoenix. I think Phoenix is playing at a higher level than what I think they'll end up being. I think they're outplaying and outperforming what I think their value is at this point in time as a team. I see them as a nice 4th or 5th seed. And I think they've been very cohesive. They haven't had any injuries really. They've been pretty healthy. I think as long as that continues, they could have a big shot at second. But I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, the Lakers, you see what happens once one major thing goes off the rails, and you see what happens there. Same thing with the Clippers. The Clippers just can never keep it going smoothly because they've always have one of their key 2 members out of the lineup consistently. And the same thing goes for Phoenix on that, is that if Phoenix suffers a major injury or at least even a 2-3 week period with Chris Paul or Devin Booker out, I see that shifting as far as it's concerned. And I see the Lakers probably taking the best one to take advantage as far as second. I think first place is, and I'll get to you next, Sean, but I think first place is a tough thing to ask. Like you said, LakerTom, I think it's a 10 to 15% probability. Utah looks good. Utah looks very deep at this point. They look like, a lot of people have been emulating them to the Milwaukee and Atlanta teams of Mike Budenholzer as far as great in the regular season. So I think that's going to take place. I think Ersan Ilyasova is a great signing for them as far as the backup is concerned. I think that actually it might be even slightly better than getting Blake Griffin. For the Nets, to me, be honest with you, because of the deteriorating skills at that point. But We'll see what happens there. And Elton Barrios, thank you so much for the thumbs up. We truly appreciate it as well. But Sean, you had something you want to interject with before we head on to our next topic.
Yes, Gerald, you were mentioning the Clippers. I mean, at first, it was saying, Paul George is missing the game because of back spasms. And then it turns out, no, he drank too much coffee. I mean, this is just getting beyond absurd with this franchise. I mean, could you imagine Mike Evans of the Buccaneers walking into the quarterback room and talking to Tom Brady and Bruce Arians and saying, hey, guys, you know what? I ate too many French fries last night, and I won't be able to play in the game on Sunday. Can you imagine the response?
He wouldn't be getting the contract extension or whatever they did to the contract yesterday or today. They wouldn't be, asking him to stay on the team because, in football, they can just cut you and cut a big chunk of their salary for any industry. It's not guaranteed as they would like to say in the NBA. So I agree with you on that. It's just something that's very disappointing for Clippers fans out there, which, we don't, especially LakerTom, doesn't have any sympathy for. I just feel sorry sometimes very I feel a lot of pity. I feel a lot of pity a lot of times for Clippers because I was there and I see the sports arena. You know, I feel like the lost dog and say, "Oh, poor doggy, poor Clippers."
You want to kick them when they're down.
They should have stayed in San Diego. Go back to San Diego.
LakerTom is going to, kick them when they're down. But I will say this: the Clippers and the Lakers. I know they're both looking at the postseason. I mean, they're both clearly focused on trying to go ahead and do what they need to do. Where they're like LakerTom says, they're looking at what they can do to make changes and additions to the roster that will make them better for that period of time in May, not looking at what they're doing necessarily in March or April. So I get that, and I can totally understand that, which brings me into the next topic of discussion right now, and that is what I said before with Blake Griffin and early on Ersan Ilyasova. Blake Griffin, if you didn't know, you didn't hear, he decided to go ahead and ditch $13 million for the remaining 2 years on his contract, which, again, Rafael Barlow and I thought was totally crazy. Don't feel too bad for him. He's still got $60 million coming his way over the next 2 years. And with that, he's going to go ahead and sign a contract with Brooklyn. Actually, he already has, and he'll be suiting up as early as Friday. I don't know what he has left. I think that's the big question. I think everybody around the NBA is looking at him and saying, what does he have left? I know Ersan Ilyasova, I think he was playing in Europe after he decided to leave the NBA. I think after his deal with Milwaukee came up, but he got re-signed to Utah. Those are two signings that were out there. I want to hear your thoughts on who could become available next on the buyout market. Tom, I'll go with you. And would they be heading to the Lakers? I know the big name is Andre Drummond out there, but I think Cleveland's just going to, as I hear from the guys at ESPN, they're all commenting and saying that they're going to hold on to him as long as they can for a trade. So I want to hear your thoughts on, who will be on next available on the buyout market next, and would they be heading to the Lakers?
There seems to be a lot of optimism from the Lakers front office, or at least that's what people are perceiving, that Drummond might be really interested in the Lakers. I think they forget that, Rob Pelinka was his agent. He fired Rob Pelinka. And also, he's always been good friends with Anthony Davis. But I think that he's likely to – I don't think they're going to be able to get a trade. So eventually they're going to buy him out. He's going to work.
He's got $28 million on his contract.
$28 million. So it's going to be hard. And he's a free agent too. I mean, you trade for somebody for $28 million and you can't even be sure you can sign him. Lakers are holding out for him over Boogie. And I think that he'll end up going to the Nets. And I think that we'll end up signing Boogie. And I like that deal for the Lakers better simply because Boogie can body up against some of the other bigger players that will meet in the playoffs. He's not the defender that he used to be, but he's a volume three-point shooter, can shoot 35% and take 6 or 7 threes a game and not at all be worried about that. He will become the highest volume three-point shooter that we have on the team. And I think there's great value in that because other than Philadelphia, every one of the other teams that we're going to be competing against make 3 or 4, as many as 7 in the case of Utah, more threes than they allow in a game. And that's a big disadvantage to try to overcome. So that's, I think, the logical move. I also think that the possibility of Ariza being bought out would be somebody who would definitely be a good addition to the Lakers.
How about someone like George Hill?
Two candidates that I see that I would have the most interest in as a buyout. Now, I wouldn't turn down Drummond if he wanted to come and play with the Lakers. I think that he could fill a use. For one thing, unlike JaVale McGee or Dwight Howard, he can defend and block shots, but he's a great rebounder. And then secondly, he can score. He can score in a low post. And he creates size problems for a lot of different teams. So we'll see what happens with the buyout market. I don't think the buyout market is going to be enough to eliminate the luck factor that I talk about when wanting to have the Lakers do something before the trade deadline.
And you got to remember, Andre Drummond is, I think, 28 years old. So
Right.
He's still in the prime of his career. You're right on Boogie. I mean, if we get Boogie and he goes, what do you want me to do, coach, as he's going to step into the game? Can I shoot threes? Frank Vogel will go right ahead and be like, Boogie be like,
Well, that's why AD loved playing with him because he
Yeah.
really stretched the floor for him and opened up things underneath.
Yeah. But that was a different Boogie. I don't know if that Boogie's ever come back.
Well,
He's only had one game this season where it was Boogie-ish like with the Houston Rockets. But Sean, I know you, before I hit it to Jamie, did you want to say something? I know you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Gerald. The historian in me again. Let's flash back to 2012, I believe. It was around this time. Baron Davis is on the Cavs. LeBron's trying to march to his first championship. And Dan Gilbert calls Baron Davis up to his office. Baron's really surprised. He's like, the GM doesn't know. They're like, Dan wants to talk to you. So Gilbert basically tells him, I'm not letting you out of your contract. Because if I let you out of your contract, you're going to sign with the Heat, and LeBron's going to march his way to a championship. So you're going to sit on the bench and run for the rest of the year. I could see him doing the same thing with Andre Drummond, even though LeBron did win him a championship afterwards. But, I mean, it's just the cold-hearted prick in Dan Gilbert that you can just never trust as an executive in the NBA.
Well, there's still a very real possibility that Brooklyn might get Andre Drummond's services. There's also talk of Milwaukee. There's also talk of the Clippers. If he becomes on the open market because he's the best rebounder in the NBA or very close to it. In fact, statistically, he was the best in the NBA for this season.
He was.
He is going to be someone who is very desirable out there in the open market. I mean, I hear the rumors right now on ESPN that LaMarcus Aldridge is available. He can shoot threes, but he's not going to be able at this stage, or at least hasn't at this stage been able to give you much else. He reminds me a lot of Blake Griffin in that sense. Is you really don't know what kind of individual you're going to get with the diminishing returns that's out there. But Jamie, I want to hear your thoughts on this. I mean, is there anyone on your lookout for as far as it's concerned? I mean, I said George Hill might be a possibility, although I think he's probably going to get traded. He's still probably someone that you can get picks for. I think there's, again, LakerTom suggested Trevor Ariza, obviously Drummond and Boogie. Boogie's out there right now for anyone to get at this point. So who are you eyeing right now on the buyout market?
I mean, the buyout market's so hard, right? Because, once a guy's been waived, Cousins has been on the open market without a team for going on a month now, right? 3 weeks, a month, something like that. And there's nobody – either he's waiting and there's nobody coming after him, or there's nobody coming after him.
I said Blake Griffin gave up $13 million just to get back out on the open market.
Which is
and he only took $1 million from the Nets. He could have got $5 million.
Yep.
Well, they're hoping to get. That's the Andre Drummond money they're saving right there. That's what that's for. Or like an Ariza or another guy.
But yeah, we'll see how it happens. I just wanted to go ahead and say, Sean, I know you were raising your hand again. So what you had before we go ahead and to hit up on trade possibilities?
Right, just some closing thoughts on the buyout market, free agency there, Gerald. A name that was floated around to begin this season was Dwayne Dedman, and he remains on the couch right now. And while he had a lot of skills that would make him a rotational player in the NBA, like you and LakerTom and, of course, Rafael Barlow and Tim Legler and others have mentioned, his medical is a huge red flag. He's had an avulsion fracture. He's had stress tibia reaction problems. So this is a player that, unfortunately, like a Larry Hughes, who used to play with LeBron, just has an injury history where if you nick him, he could be out for 12 weeks. So I think it's very important looking forward, if the Lakers do find a big man, that their medical is pristine, clean, that you don't have to deal with those injuries like we're seeing with AD. And unfortunately, Marc Gasol has shown himself to be like a really slow caveman so far.
Well, we'll see what happens there with the buyout market, but there's also the trade market, obviously. And I know we did talk about Boston real quick, having that huge trade exception that they have for the Gordon Hayward deal. I know some other teams have an advantageous trade exception as well that they have to, and in some cases, finish up by the rest of the, by the end of the month. And if they don't use it, they'll lose it. So that's something to be aware of there. I want to go ahead and ask you, Sean, on this interesting trade target that you think the Lakers have a possibility of getting. I mean, we know about the availability of guys like THT, Kuzma, KCP, Caruso. As far as their names have all been tossed in the trade rumor market. And I know that's something that I think a lot of people are looking at, saying, you know what, take some of this, take some of that. We don't have much in the way of draft choices, but I want to hear your thoughts on a possibility on a trade target that you think is a good possibility the Lakers can get.
That's correct, Gerald. We don't have the picks to trade, but so we have to look at secondary options, right? So you look at teams that have cap space moving forward, and two interesting teams are Houston and Charlotte. Houston, I think if they're looking for a starter, I'm not sure if they would consider Alex Caruso a starter. I don't think they would, but you never know. I think if you attached him, and I'm not sure who else, I think if you attached a couple of second-round picks, you could get a PJ Tucker, and maybe they do throw in Danielle House. I mean, when he gets going, he is a really proficient three-point shooter. PJ Tucker has shown himself to play, he can play the 3, he can play the 4, he can play the 5 on just about every single possession he's on the floor for. So that would be an interesting move. Again, if you attach a THT and a Caruso with a reasonable contract, I could see Charlotte pulling the trigger and letting you have a Terry Rozier. That's a name to keep in mind under the radar that Charlotte may be looking to deal, because they have to open up a huge amount of cap space for Melo now and try and build around his skill set. And, Terry Rozier is a nice player for them, but they need more in the way of defense to surround LaMelo Ball.
I agree with you on that. They're a very guard-heavy team. When Devontae Graham comes back and he's healthy, now you've got a situation where you have 4, possibly 5 guards deep in Charlotte, and you've got Malik Monk, who is now, after so many years of being considered a draft bust, is finally exploding out there as a 6-man type of deal that I'm not sure that they want to now get rid of because he's playing so well. But then again, Devontae Graham comes back. Where does he play? Where does he fit? So they will have some questions when Devontae Graham comes back. And right around the trade deadline, it might look like that 1 or 2 of those guards might be being traded for either big man help or defensive help, like you were talking about. LakerTom, who is it that you're eyeing on the trade market?
Well, I'm eyeing almost everybody who's out there, to be honest with you, Gerald.
I know. Well, you're the man of many trades.
Right.
Some of them are good.
I'll prioritize the trades that I think are really important. My feeling is that the Lakers definitely need to have a third superstar. You don't want to go in to face the Brooklyn Nets with their 3 superstars with just 2 superstars, because you'll be playing the whole game 2 against 3 or 1 against 2. So my top priority probably would be Victor Oladipo, and primarily because and the reason I'm choosing him over the other guys that I'm going to mention is that he's a guard. And right now, if we go in with KCP and Dennis Schroeder, we're going to give up 29 points per game against Kyrie Irving and James Harden. That 29 points is almost an insurmountable number to really go in and try to make up with it. So he's probably at the top of my list, and he's definitely going to be traded. And I think I've watched the videos of him, and I've looked at his stats. The only thing that is subpar at this point in time really are his shooting percentages. And I'd love to see how those percentages would work out as a third option on the Lakers. The other guy that I love and I think is a real under the radar opportunity is Miles Turner. Miles Turner is the perfect modern center. He can block shots. He's quick enough to defend small men and switch, and he shoots threes. He would be the perfect player to play in the front court with Anthony Davis. And he basically, the whole situation at Indiana is that they have not been able to be successful playing Sabonis and Turner on the floor at the same time. It's really deteriorated month by month, and they need to put Sabonis at the 5, and they need to trade Turner because he's making a starter salary. So he's the second one. And then the third one is not as good a guard situation as getting a young player like Oladipo, who's only 28. But the word is that Kyle Lowry may be traded from the Raptors. I know Sean's shaking his head, but there's been a lot of talk about him. There's been a lot of talk about him.
Well, it's up to Kyle. I think it's more situations up to Kyle because it's such a face of the franchise.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I just wanted to interject. Bobby was on the Toronto radio this evening, and he said that the Toronto Raptors are not moving Kyle Lowry. He's going to remain a Raptor until the end of the season.
There's a lot of people who say that and then trade a guy a week later.
Yeah, that's true. Too. I think, like he said, his contributions to the franchise have been so great. I think it's up to Kyle if he wants to go ahead and say, you know what, I don't think Toronto's at the stage where they need to be. I want to help out Toronto now. I mean, I want to help out Toronto with with their future, and I want to go ahead and help myself now with getting on a championship level team. So I think as we get Sean back here in a few minutes, I think that's a good suggestion as well. Jamie, you already mentioned, or did you mention your suggestions yet on trades? Is there a trade target?
I did not.
Go for it.
Cool. Thank you. I mean,
targeting right now.
Lockdown. I think that, for the trades, the players that I want to trade are players everybody knows we want to trade because they're going to be hard for us to hold on to the offseason. I'm not so high on trading the KCPs, even though he's underperformed, or the Kyle Kuzmas, because I'd be open to trading Kyle because you're going to need to include somebody like him to make a trade go down.
LakerTom with the button.
Yes.
No. Anyway, I just read to Sean's point about Kyle Lowry. There's an article that came out a couple hours ago on where it's Kyle Lowry himself is not expecting to be traded before the deadline. It sounds like so. I think that the idea that it's up to Kyle is exactly right. I think there's a big part of him that probably wants to retire in Toronto, like pull a Kobe and just be the first player ever to retire as a Toronto Raptor, be a Toronto Raptor for this entirety of their career. Whether that holds true or not remains to be seen. Things change as you move through your life. There's no saying. I would like to see Kyle Lowry as a Laker more than I would like to see Victor Oladipo, just because I consider Kyle Lowry to be more durable. But I think Oladipo is actually probably the better fit for our culture because he's a two-way guy. He plays when he's healthy and when he's motivated. He plays great defense, and I feel like he would at the very least be motivated. The healthy part for me is still a pretty big question mark. It's hard to say when you play on a bad team. It's easy to put up numbers. We've seen that on the Lakers and prior to LeBron coming here, and even LeBron's first year. There's just one of those. It's somebody's got to shoot the ball, right? Somebody's got, you're not going to not shoot the ball just because nobody's a great player. So I think that all of those players are gettable. I think that we're probably going to have to overpay a little bit to get them. First off, I still think there's a lot of, I don't want to trade with Rob Pelinka out there in the NBA. I think we know as Laker fans that there's certainly Laker bias that would, can I trade him to this team and not LA? Great, I'm doing it. So I think that's going to factor into it a little bit. I don't necessarily have a trade target. I like Tom's Oladipo trade. I love the Devontae Graham trade, and I feel like that's kind of the most gettable because of the situation in Charlotte, because of the free agency status of Graham, and the fact that they're not going to break the bank to keep a guy like that who they're having success without. These teams that don't make the playoffs every year, and especially these small market teams that don't make the playoffs every year, unless it's going to save them a boatload of money, and you're not saving money in the trade market unless you're trading with Boston, because that's where the exception comes into play, you're not going to just sabotage yourself right before the playoffs and disrupt your whole roster. If it's working right now, I feel like teams New York is not a small market team, but New York hasn't been in the playoffs so long that I have a hard time seeing these teams like saying like, well, you know what, this is working. Now let's change it, which it's possible, right? It's the NBA. Anything can happen. That's just how I feel about it. Being the casual fan and semi-avid sport person that I am. So, if my trade targets are a lot more unrealistic. I would like to see us get. I know it's not going to happen. I would love for us to get like a Patty Mills, who's from a defense culture like the Spurs, who takes threes and makes threes, but does it within like a system. Isn't just a gunner. We got gunners. Kyle Kuzma's a gunner. KCP's a gunner. We got guys that are willing to put it up. They're just not making them, and they're not doing it within the system right now. So that's where I have the bigger issue with our current roster is that, especially in Pope's case, I don't understand where the struggle is. Like, you had success in the system, and I have to attribute it to a physical deficiency of some sort, whether his ankle's not right, which would explain a lot because your ankles are all up in the jump shot. And that's sort of where I'm coming from on the trade market. I almost never want to make trades. Tom can attest to this. I almost never want to make trades. I like to roll it back. I like to run it back. I like to, I like the guys that are on the team. But I also know that it's a business that turnover in the NBA is part of the business. It's big business. The trade market coverage is going to start blowing up now that the All-Star game's over, and it's going to be every day. Who's going where? What's going to happen? I heard this. The Skip Baylesses are going to go crazy. All the talking heads are going to pontificate to the end of the day. So I prefer to let them do that. I'll be curious to see. I'm a little more curious to see what happens on the buyout market.
We're signaling the ref for a quick timeout, but we'll be back with more of the Lakers Fast Break podcast. Hey, Lakers fans! Looking for the best place to go for up-to-date news, information, original videos, articles, podcasts, opinion pieces, and discussions about the world champion Los Angeles Lakers? Well, look no further than LakerHolics.com. With a legion of followers always there talking about everything Lakers and the NBA, there's no better place to go to share your fandom as the team heads toward another championship run. So stop by and be part of the conversation today at LakerHolics.com. But I think first off, when you talked about San Antonio, and I'll get to you next, Sean, is that when it comes to San Antonio, I said earlier this season that I thought they should look at one way or the other. And it's definitely now what they're playing. They're in the top 8 right now. So
they're not going to trade Patty Mills.
Yeah, they're not going to trade Patty Mills. I think also DeMar DeRozan's going to stay because he's playing at an all-star level. You already hear LaMarcus Aldridge rumors because they think, they can get something for him and they can get rid of him and it really won't hurt him because he's not played a
he's
great
not playing.
time. Yeah.
No,
and same thing with Rudy Gay. I think Rudy Gay either will be traded or be on the buyout market because he's someone that fits along those same parameters who can still play decent defense and shoot 3-pointers.
I'd be cool if Rudy Gay got bought out. I'd be cool if the Lakers made a move for Rudy Gay. I'd be fine with that.
I just don't see Mills and DeRozan being traded I once did. I mean, when the Lakers went into San Antonio, beat them 2 straight, I think that was the time where they were really on a down part of their season. But they've managed to go ahead, and Popovich has weaved his magic into using that young lineup to go ahead and believe in themselves, and they're now playing at a level that's playoff level. So obviously you have to go ahead and play from there. Go ahead, Sean. I want you to go ahead and touch on whichever you need to touch on before we go ahead and finish out our great conversation.
Yeah, Gerald, I was just going to piggyback off what Jamie was saying. Another option in the trade market you see over the years has been the disappointments trade. This guy disappointed for this team is traded to that team for a guy who disappointed for them. And normally what happens is one of those players finds a way to click in a new situation. I'll give you a perfect example. Mo Harkless. Mo Harkless, before the pandemic, was a coveted asset on the trade market. He was considered a 3-and-D guy. And now he's running on the bench in Miami. He can't find minutes on that team. So you could pick up the phone and inquire, maybe you want to trade a Wes Matthews for Mo Harkless and give Mo a shot because in a new situation, I think he could be a shot in the arm.
Well, I'll tell you what, that's a good suggestion right there. I was also thinking Orlando. I've said this before, Evan Fournier and also Kim Birch. I think a package for those two might help out the Lakers, not only on the defensive end, but get LakerTom somewhere a little bit closer as far as an individual in Fournier who loves to take threes. So that might get them a little bit better as far as volume threes are concerned. But Jamie, you had one thing you want to interject before we
Just a quick thing. LaMarcus Aldridge is officially not returning to the Spurs. They are working on a trade for him, so that's
or a buyout.
Boston.
Yeah.
According to reading the article, it sounds like they don't want to do a buyout. They want to do right by LMA. I would imagine he would go to Boston at that point because you basically just have to say like, give us that guy who doesn't
with that $20 million.
What? But wait, hold on. When you say a buyout, you don't necessarily have to give up money. I mean, it could be right after the trade deadline, and you just go ahead and say, you know what, we will pay you off for the rest of your contract.
Sure.
And now you go.
Right.
So that's what happens there. That's what I'm talking with LMA. If they can't get a deal done, he might be gone by the buyout time. Anyways, they don't have to pay. He doesn't have to get back a dime, and he could still be traded. If people don't see his value, it's just a matter of right now.
But only to a team that's got space. Only to a team that's got space.
Yeah, and I mean that's
or
true.
A trade exception.
Yeah, or your trade exception. But it's all dependent on right now how you perceive LaMarcus Aldridge at this point of his career.
So none of you guys,
he would help Boston as an anemic center.
Yeah, something like that. But can he still play the five? We'll have to wait and see. But Tom, go ahead before we head on to the.
None of you guys seem to feel like the Lakers need. Man, that's why I differ dramatically from you. Right now, if you look around at the power rankings, almost everybody has the Nets above the Lakers. There are some of the power rankings that actually have the Lakers down at like 7th or 8th or 9th. And it for good reason. Because we've shown that we've got two major flaws. We can't shoot the three, and we can't protect the rim. Now that's, when you look at those two things together, those are pretty big flaws. And they aren't going to disappear with the existing team we have, because the only way they're going to improve their three-point differential is to shoot a lot of threes, and you just don't change the nature of the team so that you all of a sudden have guys who are taking 2 or 3 threes a game, take 6 or 7 or 7 or 8. You need to change your roster. And you can't protect the rim when you don't have anybody big to do that. Yeah. So you still need to change the roster. So my whole position is that the Lakers will make a trade. They will do everything they can to fill those two holes, because they know that Brooklyn, everybody probably but the Clippers, who have sort of said that they're going to stay with what they're going, everybody else is going to be looking, and there's going to be a lot of action between the teams. Denver's going to get somebody. The Jazz are going to get somebody. All of these teams, Philadelphia is going to get somebody. The Nets are going to get some more help. So the Lakers can't stand pat, or their odds of winning a championship are going to decline.
Sean, go ahead real quick, because I really want to touch on this last subject, because I know we have to run real quick. Go ahead.
Sure, Gerald. I'll make it real quick. I really want to clear up an assumption out there, because there's a bad syllogism going on with Lakers Twitter right now and social media, and I'd like to clear it up. Seedings don't matter. Then it was seedings matter because AD is hurt. The problem with that theory is what Tom was talking about. People assume that James Harden is going to be something different than what he's been in the playoffs. He's been a disappointment in the playoffs, and he's fitting in well with that team. But stylistically, he hasn't changed anything. And I feel the same way you do, Gerald. I don't see a big difference. I see maybe the Nets taking the Lakers to a 7th game in the NBA Finals if they met. That's a distinct possibility. But I don't see this team defeating the Lakers in a matchup.
Well, we'll see what happens.
I'm not assuming that Harden
is a point guard now, not a shooting guard on that team.
It doesn't matter on that team. They're all the alpha A1. They're A1, A2, and A3 in the steak sauce aisle.
Yeah, and I know Philly and Milwaukee will also have something to say about it as well. I know Jamie's leaning towards Philly at this point in time. I'm still leaning towards Brooklyn, but We'll get into those discussions as it get closer to the end of the season. I think we'll really have some in-depth conversations. But before we head on out, so I know we got to run real quick, please check out the great articles that LakerTom has at LakerHolics.com and also his Medium.com site. 5 great things from Jamie Sweets also is there on LakerHolics.com. And please be part of our Facebook group, Lakerholics. Be part of the conversation today at LakerHolics.com. Sean Grice, a.k.a. MagicMan, also does a ton of stuff at LakerHolics.com. But before we head on out, I really want to touch on this subject, and that is this. And this is not only ongoing and should stay ongoing as far as the league's concentration on helping out the Black Lives Matter movement, as far as going ahead and fighting for racial equality. But, we've seen in the past couple months, and I know LakerTom and I have discussed this off air, is the growing trend and the growing problem of the rise in, hate crimes against the Asian American individuals in this country. And I'm just really, it just irritates me to no end, just like it did last year. And I was very emotional last year as far as discussing the issue of the Black Lives Matter movement, how important it is to everyone out there that we have equality in our world. But MagicMan, I'm going to start with you, and I'm going to close it out with LakerTom after Jamie. Real quick, MagicMan, your thoughts on if the NBA should do something similar, and as well as they're keeping on with the Black Lives Matter movement and keeping on with that message that they should continue to send out as far as the things that they need to do for the African American community. But I also think they need to send out messages for the Asian American community as well.
Absolutely, Gerald. I'm not violating any laws here, but unfortunately, I have been to a couple calls where Asian has been assaulted, and it's been a hate crime. It's that simple, and it makes me sick. I saw a recent report on CNN that showed the brutal assault of a couple men who were just minding their own business. It makes me sick, and I really do think that Adam Silver owes it to the community to make it a priority along with Black Lives Matter. I agree with you, and I agree with Tom on that sentiment.
This is something, Jamie, I want to go ahead and say, this is something we were on as much as we can. And, you got to credit the NBA at that time. They did a lot towards it. I still think they could have done more, and I still think they can do more today. And they are doing some things that are stepping in those directions. And I do want them to do more as far as for the African-American community out there. Not to mention the fact that there's only less than a third coaches out there are African-American, and that's still very troubling to me. But getting into what we're talking about as far as being a better representative for the African-American community that the NBA should do and continue to do, I think they need to send a better message of hope and of unity with the Asian American community as well.
I agree. I mean, let's put it this way. The human species is inherently flawed. There will always be flaws in all the things we do as humans. But what also makes us human is us striving to overcome those flaws and trying to improve on those flaws and moving past a world where those flaws are assumed as just part of the rigmarole of day-to-day life. That's what is the most toxic when the defense is, well, this is just how it is, or this is how it's always been. That to me is a ludicrous defense for everything. Tom used to argue vigorously that the idea that the 3-pointer is more important just because it's always been a 2-point game was one of the things that, I think he argued about it for about a half century. A lot of that logic is borne out. And so, there will always be something that holds our societies back. A shout out to Jeremy Lin, not just for having the courage to speak up about it, but also for honoring the NBA code, not angering the basketball gods, being being a part of the NBA brotherhood and saying I'm not going to throw whoever it was under the bus. That's not who I am. I have a lot of respect for that. Some people might look at that as maybe he's hiding or whatever. I don't think that's what it is. I think he's being a stand-up guy and being the bigger, better human, the bigger man, the better human. I have a lot of respect for that sort of thing, and I have no respect for anybody who uses uses language in that way to take away from other people. The human language, when deployed accurately and with positive intent, is such a beautiful thing. All languages are, not just English. All languages are. All cultures are, and this idea that Americans have more than most other countries, not exclusively, but that somehow, they're races that aren't, or if there are people who aren't like worth the effort or worth the time or like worthy of even hearing from, or is to me absurd. And so I look at what the NBA does as great steps in the right direction. Everybody can do more. Everybody can take it upon themselves to be better in and of themselves, but also to hold their friends and family to higher standards. Nothing's going to change if that doesn't happen. The NBA can do all the great and wonderful things in the universe. It can throw all the money at HBCUs. It can put whatever it wants on the court. It can put whatever it wants on the back of a jersey. It still won't change people. It'll just be showing a great level of solidarity, which I think is important, but it won't be we will be the change. The NBA will not be the change.
All right, last but certainly not least, LakerTom. This is an issue that's important to me because I am married to an Asian woman who is an American citizen, and I also have 2 kids of Asian American descent. Now, I want to hear your thoughts on this. This is really important to me that they live in a world of equality. In an area that you live in of the country that has been stricken hard by this rise in hate towards Asian Americans, I know this is something on a very personal nature for you as well.
Well, it's funny to think that Jeremy Lin could be called COVID Willies on the court playing a game of basketball, or that Miles Leonard could use a derogatory term toward a Jewish person. You think that we're making progress, and then you realize that some of these things are just so embedded into our society and such. You wonder why I never raised my hand like Sean does. It's because I was the only Chinese kid in every school that I grew up in grade school. And I heard enough of the Willy Wong, Charlie Chan jokes and got in enough fights that I was never going to be that Chinese kid in the back of the room who raised his hand up politely. I went to the front of the room and I spoke up. And that's the way I've led my life ever since. I don't claim to have suffered from racism the way that many of my black friends have been. But my grandfather came over to this country as a coolie, working on the railroads and sending his money back home to Gold Mountain. And, it just really infuriates me. It took me a long time to become proud to be half Chinese. And for a good portion of my early years, I was embarrassed and ashamed of it and punched out anybody that would ever remind me of that. So I think the NBA owes it to, in the case of whether it's against blacks, whether it's against Asians, whether it's against Jews, whether it's against Muslims, I don't care. We're all people, and you better treat everybody in the same manner and have the same sense of fairness and justice. And we don't have that in this country. And sadly, there's a whole lot of leaders in this country who don't even think that it's important.
And I'll tell you what, I'm not firing LakerTom anytime soon.
I was going to say, we brought it right back to the comments from before with this, I'm going to.
Absolutely.
I mean, listen, you got something to say in this country, you better speak up or you're not going to be heard.
Nope, I agree.
And I've told Sean the same thing, half a dozen times. Break in. When you got something to say, don't sit back there and just wait. I don't know what it is with you polite Canadians, but
break in, Sean. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, but before you head out, Gerald, because I know you're short on time. Just really quickly, I'm working on a MagicMan 6-seed race. Who would be your pick right now, Gerald, Tom, Jamie? Just real quick.
6 seed,
man.
Yeah,
no,
6 seed.
6 seed.
Oh,
Miami's in the 6th seed right now in the East.
I'm going to go with New York and San Antonio.
Okay. All right.
I'm going to go with Atlanta.
Ooh.
And, I'm going to say Dallas.
Bold. Gerald Glassford is bold right now, ladies and gentlemen.
I'll go with New York and Dallas. Those would be my favorites to see. Wait a minute. Where's Charlotte right now?
They would be in the play-in.
I'll go with Charlotte then for sure. They're my league pass other team.
Some great thoughts right there from Sean Grice, a.k.a. MagicMan, LakerTom, and Jamie Sweet. If you have any opinions or questions on us, you can always go ahead and reach out to us at LakersFastBreak, LakersFastBreak@yahoo.com, or the best place to share your opinion, you can also do it on a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. As we noted, we went ahead and said it today. LakerHolics.com, though, we really do want you to be part of the conversation today at LakerHolics.com. Well, guys, this is a great conversation. I will see all of you on Friday after the Lakers game right here at the Lakers Fast Break Podcast.